First, we just want to give you an overview of what it means to be a certified broadcast meteorologist.
And give you some hints on how to get your CBM designation. As recent chairs, we get a lot of questions about what should be in the tapes, what shouldn't be in the tapes. One of the biggest questions we get is what should be in an active day versus what should be in a regular day. And the primary reason that we started requesting that a few years ago was that we wanted to see something different. We would get tapes from people that were back to back to back in the middle of a ridge of high pressure, and every single weathercast was the exact same. And even though they were good weathercasts, we didn't get an opportunity to see how that meteorologist responded in severe weather situations or in other types of weather situations. So the primary thing is those two weathercasts should be different. And obviously what active means in your particular DMA in your market is very different from others.
Right, and so we take that into account. So if you're in a region or even on a shift where you may not have the opportunity to take that tornado warning day or that blizzard day, just send us what's active for your region, active for your time of day, for your shift.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a tornado warning, doesn't have to be a severe thunderstorm warning. Obviously not everyone gets those. It doesn't have to be a warning or watch or advisory of any kind from the National Weather Service, although that does help if you have that in there. Primarily, it just needs to be different from what you would do on an everyday type of situation.
Right, and that allows an opportunity for you to showcase your specialty, graphics, how you can teach science and explain it when you've got a whole lot going on. And that's what we're looking for. How are you as a communicator, both verbally and also graphically? That's really important for us to see.
Some examples of active weather. Obviously, if a severe thunderstorm or a tornado would be great, but not everyone gets those. Maybe it could be something as simple as a winter storm advisory if you're in the north, or winter weather advisory would also work. If you're in an area that just doesn't get a whole lot of severe weather, maybe it's a dense fog advisory in your area. Whatever is different from the typical day.
Right, and that's what's going to make a difference. And think about precipitation. And if you're having a tough time figuring out what's active, you're always welcome to reach out to any of the board members or the AMS and ask for some questions and advice. And always ask other SEAL or CBM holders, because they'll be able to guide you to with some advice.
And that's a good idea anyway. Before you submit your tapes, you should have another CBM, a meteorologist that you trust, take a look at someone that's already been through the process. Have them take a look at your work and what you're thinking of submitting, and have them give you some critique.
And I think it's important for us to mention that although you can apply as soon as you have your degree and you take your test and you pass, we encourage you to have a couple of years of on-air experience under your belt so that you put your best first effort forward for the board to review.
Yeah, it's not a requirement, but strongly suggest you have a couple of years of experience before you submit. You can really tell the difference that couple of years makes when we're reviewing the tapes. And speaking of reviewing, we're often asked what do we look for? Mostly that you can explain whatever it is that you're talking about. That is crucial. You don't have to throw out fancy words for us. Sometimes we get tapes and it seems obvious that the applicant is talking just to us. They're throwing out all sorts of jargon and words that no one else would understand except those reviewing it. Don't do that. Do what you would normally do. Just explain it. You can say whatever you want. Just explain it.
Yeah, you want to give the what of the weather, sure. That's the basics that we're looking for. But remember, to pass, you need to be above average. Average, the way that we grade it, is 3. So we want you to be above that average. We've got a lot of great meteorologists on air, but we're looking for the above average meteorologists, those who go above and beyond what is expected, the standard, if you will. So we want you to explain the what, we want you to explain the why, and look for all those opportunities where you can teach science, explain the why. It can be as simple as taking 5 seconds to explain what is this thing and why is it happening, how is it impacting you, and then move on. It doesn't necessarily need to be 15 minutes devoted, 15 seconds, devoted to a special weather graphic where you just dig down deep. It can just be this constant reminder of this is what this means and why. Okay, and here's how it impacts you. Then you get to your future weather graphics. Remember I said this, here's what it means and why it's impacting us on this day, or that day.
Another thing we look for is, do you emphasize the most important part of the weather? We've seen a lot of weathercasts where someone will go into great detail about something that doesn't seem all that important, and then at the very end, at the final 2 seconds, go, oh, and by the way, there's a severe thunderstorm warning. Here's your 7-day forecast. Don't do that. Make sure whatever is important, whether it's a severe thunderstorm warning or watch or advisory, whatever is important is near the top, and make sure that is emphasized, and that is the primary focus of your weathercast.
We also get questions about appearance. So the way that the grading works is we look at your graphics, we look at how you explain things, and then we look at your general presentation style. Basically, if you are dressed professionally, you carry yourself professionally, you pay attention to your pace, to your inflection, to your tone, that's what we're looking at. So it's similar to what a consultant would be advising you on. We're trying to give you constructive feedback. I think that's important. All of our reviewers give a really good job of explaining why they graded you the way that they did. So whether you pass or you don't, they're going to give you feedback that you can use to improve your product on air for your customers, for your viewers.
And speaking of consultants, we know we get a lot of comments from people going through the process, applicants saying, hey, I've got a consultant or a manager that says, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this, I can't do that. It makes it really tough for me to pass. What should I do? Our advice is usually just tell your news director, you need to apply for the AMS, and you may have to get special permission just to do things slightly differently for a couple of days. And if you need help talking to your news director about that, contact the broadcast board. We can help you with that.
Right, and it's important to note that we as a society, we have standards that we promise to uphold. And it's important that you know, and that your news directors know, and the consultants know that we are going to grade you according to those standards. And so it is important that you present weathercasts that do show us surface features, that do show us and explain what high pressure systems are, low pressure systems are, cold fronts, warm fronts, stationary fronts. Basics of weather. It's really important, and we as a society are committed to making sure that you can still communicate and educate and advance the mission of the American Meteorological Society on air.